Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Cindy Hoots. Cindy's the Chief Digital Officer and Chief Information Officer of AstraZeneca, a nearly $38 billion revenue pharmaceutical and biotechnology company. She's held that role for nearly 3 years. And in that role, she's indicated that she hopes to leverage technology to make a meaningful impact on the lives of a billion people. I look forward to understanding more about that goal and the work she and her team are driving there. Cindy's been a technology executive at a number of major companies prior to her time at AstraZeneca, including at Unilever, BAT, SAB Miller, ITT, and Mars. Cindy, welcome to Technovation. Looking forward to speak with you. I'm so glad to see you today.
Thanks, Peter. So great to be here.
So I wonder if you could take a quick moment, Cindy. I gave the briefest of thumbnail sketches of AstraZeneca's business. Maybe take a few more minutes if you don't mind and just give an overview as to the business you all are in.
Yeah, so AstraZeneca is headquartered in Cambridge in the UK, and we have a strong pipeline across not only the rare disease area, which we just did a major acquisition about a year ago. We're strong in building our business in the oncology space, and then in the biopharma area in terms of chronic diseases, heart disease, cardiovascular issues, those types of things that people oftentimes have to live with for quite a long period of time.
Yeah, very interesting. And you, as I mentioned, are the CDO and CIO. Take a moment, if you would, and provide a bit of an overview of all that you oversee. And if you don't mind talking a bit about the two sides of your title, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, so I am the Chief Digital Officer and the CIO, a role that when they were looking at this particular job put together as one role. I think for me, in many ways, they really are well suited for each other. In the early days, we had these chief digital officers, which in my mind is kind of a more temporary role around how do you act as a catalyst for an organization in terms of helping them to understand how technology can change the way they do business today, but also what other business models and business adjacencies you can get into in the future. And I think so much of that is driven from technology. And so I think in the chief digital officer roles, it's about being a catalyst of change and thinking about how do people go along on that particular journey, thinking about how their jobs change. I remember in previous roles, we would talk about, the marketing department and digital marketeers. And I think in the early stages, that's really a fundamental difference. But over time, what we want to do is democratize digital to the point that it's everybody's job. And how do you therefore upskill the entire organization and increase the overall kind of digital maturity? And so I think in that part of the role, it's about how do we create a learning culture? How do we create an organization that's, ready for change, that can start to understand what this technology can do, and more importantly, how do they and their teams leverage it, to again transform the way we work. I think in the CIO aspect, it's really about how do you create a modern technology organization. I mean, we all know that the needs of organizations is rapidly changing, and certainly the last 3 years gave us a lot of life lessons in that regard. In the CIO side, the fact that I am a technologist, that I started as a programmer, that I've spent a lot of time understanding the technology side, and then being able to couple that with business knowledge about where is the business trying to go and how can we marry these two things together. I think all of it kind of comes together in quite a cohesive way.
I really like your overview of why the CDO in some ways may be a temporary role for many, because it demarcates a change that needs to happen. But once it has happened, it becomes pervasive. Perhaps at least the title becomes less necessary. I appreciate that. Perhaps then in the future, roles like yours will return to simply the CIO role, or maybe there's a different moniker that's used. But that's a really interesting perspective you shared there.
I mean, I think it's really important because I think the whole goal is to democratize it, right?
No.
When many companies start on this digital journey, they carve out 5%, 10% of the team that's going to work in this new digital way because you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to understand what it means for, your industry, your company, your department. But if we do the job right and we actually uplift and it becomes everybody's job to do it, then I think these jobs have kind of served their purpose and then go away. And I think in talking to a number of other chief digital officers, I think that is a shared kind of viewpoint across many of them.
Yeah, great perspective. Thank you for that. I wonder, talk a bit about your team, if you would. And you articulated a few different things that are under your purview. Is your team also divided into a digital side of the house and an IT side of the house, if you will, or are they commingled to a greater extent? How is it organized, please?
Yeah, so I made a kind of a conscious decision to commingle it because, again, I think if you believe that it's everybody's job to do digital, then what we want to do is, kind of grow that skill across the organization. So we've really kind of taken more of a holistic approach, and we partner really well with our kind of business functions who help on the change management side and introducing the change. But on the IT side, we've just chosen, or I've chosen, to keep it holistic. And I think that gives us a longer runway of, our new operating model and all of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yours is a global team, and it's a global company, as you point out, with major operations in so many different parts of the world. Talk a bit about how you manage such a broad-reaching team as yours.
Yeah, so we do have a team that's mainly located in 3 hub sites, so the U.S., the U.K., and Sweden, which is where our big R&D centers are. And then we have 2 big centers in India as well as Guadalajara that we call Global Innovation and Technology Centers, and that has the predominance of my IT organization is in those 2 locations. But then we also have other parts of IT where they're scattered around the business, either in being close to sales offices or manufacturing facilities. Geographically, we're kind of dispersed. I think in terms of managing it, we're predominantly insourced. I think that's really served us incredibly well. A model that I think will continue, at least for the tenure for me. I think it's really an important aspect as technology changes to make sure that we're building those technology skills within the organization. I think the reality is it's a bit like you put together the vision, you help people know where the North Star is, and from there think through the strategy. I think we've done a good job of creating our IT 2025 strategy that has probably been adopted even more than I expected. I have to say, probably the best example I've had of being able to articulate the strategy and having it be sticky and people really following it. And what's been really nice is I think it then allows for decision making, lower in the organization, because if people know where you're going and they know the strategy of how to get there, they're better able to make those decisions in a more decentralized way, which again, with an organization this big, I think helps us go at speed.
That's a great insight. Could you take a moment? I really like the way you said that the plan has been sticky, and it's one of the best examples, at least from your career, in terms of adoption as well. What are there other reasons why or methods used? I like your point about making sure that it's understood by the entire organization, even people lower in the organization. So my words, not yours. Everyone's pushing in the same direction, and so forth. Any other kind of secrets to making sure that plan is sticky and well executed?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because even just the graphics that were used around it and the little icons that we use for each of the 4 pillars. And, a lot of the strategies around leading with AI and insights, then accelerating innovation and delivery. The third one is optimizing how we work. And then the fourth one is around sustainability and people. And, what happens is we put icons around those. And so no matter when we're talking about it or presenting something, we link back through those icons to help people understand, well, how does this initiative fit into the overall strategy? So keeping that line of sight, I think these graphics have helped us do that. And then we celebrate each month on what people have done that they're really proud about. And again, they link it to the predominant category. Oftentimes an initiative will transcend both, maybe an AI and an innovation space. But they pick the prominent one. And again, it reinforces just in a natural, easy way, hey, this is what I'm working on, and this is how I contribute to the strategy, which is contributing to the overall vision. So I think a few of those little things where we link the communications to the strategy. Almost every presentation, we have the one pager part of the strategy, and then we use it to say, this is what I'm talking about today, and here's how it fits in. And that happened more organically. I remember at the end of one meeting where we had the whole ITLT together, I'm like, did somebody tell them to use this format? And they're like, no, they just chose to do it. And it was interesting to see kind of the grassroots movement where people were pulling parts of the strategy and the icons and just linking it into their presentations and kind of how they were communicating.
That's really interesting. I want to double click on a item you mentioned a while ago in your earlier response. You talked about areas where you have team members, and you highlighted places like India and Guadalajara. When people think about geographies like India or Mexico, I think oftentimes for multinationals that are based in the West, one would immediately assume that those are, in fact, outsourced providers, managed service providers of one sort or another. As you point out, most of IT within your organization is insourced. And in fact, these are colleagues of yours. And I know actually from our past conversations, Cindy, I've been really fascinated by some of the different ways in which you think about organizing those teams. I wonder if you could take a quick moment and talk a bit about the philosophy behind what you have built in places like India, for example, and different expectations you have about what can be driven there, please.
Yeah, so I was very lucky. My predecessor is actually the one that first decided to insource a lot of our IT organization, and then chose to put it into Chennai and Guadalajara. And so I got to come in and inherit that, which was brilliant. And I think initially, early on, like so many companies, it was about having dedicated people that could help us. There was certainly a labor arbitrage and an availability of resource there that was important. We did a lot of our service center and that type of work in Chennai. And I would say after the last 7 years or so, we've really proven that this model works well for us. I think the addition I was able to then make was it was working well enough that I kind of really felt like there was more that this team in these two locations could do. And so we've really been focused on how do we drive innovation out of these centers rather than being at a low-cost labor arbitrage play. There's a lot of brilliance that is in both of these locations. There's a lot of brilliance everywhere in the world, but I think it's an under-tapped market. There's so much happening, even in the startup ecosystem in India. It's starting to rival Silicon Valley. And so if you have that level of innovation, then how could we tap into that, especially the entrepreneurial spirit of our company? We like working with these types of organizations. So about a year ago, we decided to really be driving more of the innovation in India.
And a place where I know a lot of your peers are having issues of attrition, higher rates of attrition in a place like India relative to prior periods in that geography, but also relative to this current period in the U.S. or other places. I wonder to what extent, Cindy, you found that to be differentiating for you, that you're an employer where a different level of innovation can be driven, as opposed to the kind of typical, to use a pejorative, a body shop, that the sort of where the parts or pieces seem to be interchangeable. Have you found that to be the case with the team that you've built?
Yeah, it's really starting to, because, it takes a while to, you make the declaration that you're changing. When my team and I were down in Chennai last month, we met with NASCOM while we were there. And we were asking them, some questions around what is the general makeup, in terms of what types of companies are using services in India for what types of things. The statistic they shared with us is only 5% are really driving innovation right now. So it is quite differentiating. I think we'll start to see that more and more companies will move in this direction. What we're hoping to do is kind of capitalize on being an early adopter. But partly is you need to have interesting work. So first we kind of declared that, okay, we're going to drive more innovation out of our global innovation and technology centers, but you have to reorganize. So a lot of the way the work was previously done is some of the management was in the US or the UK or Sweden, and then the team might have been in India. Now we're saying, no, the leader has to be in India. Like, we want to take full pieces of work and drive them out of India, not just have them be, resources on another initiative. And so that's taking a bit of time. We're trying to hire some really skilled individuals to kind of lead in that space. And then reorient the teams. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to do great innovation in other locations, but there's so much work still to be done that we think this is a really good way of doing it. And I do think that people are starting to understand more and more what we're doing, and it's leading to some differentiation in terms of access to talent.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're expanding the aperture as to where innovation can happen, which surely is an important thing in this day and age. Well, hey, I wanted to also ask you, referenced you referred to them as life lessons of the past 2.5 years in the pandemic. I mean, you joined the company in 2020, and so much of your time has been during these very unusual times for all of us. Talk a bit about some of those life lessons and some of the, I don't know, silver linings perhaps in terms of the ways of operating for you and your colleagues during a time when, for a significant portion of it, it was very difficult to collaborate in person. Obviously, new ways of working. You're also in an industry, of course, that has been front and center of the change that's been necessary and innovation that's been necessary for us all. Talk about some of those quote unquote life lessons that you referenced.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the positive life lessons, certainly from a company perspective, is just that it showed us really quickly, if you are clear on the goal that you're trying to go after, and collaborate across functions, that you can do some fairly remarkable things. I think, more importantly, at a speed that none of us really thought was possible at the time. I mean, we were obviously not in the vaccine business, but collaborated with Oxford to manufacture their vaccine. We stood up a new manufacturing facility in 46 days. And it was beautiful watching the industry come together, the collaboration with government and academia come together, the collaboration within, companies themselves. And I think for me, I felt like I got to join this industry, and 4 weeks later we started to hit the pandemic. What was great about it was, I think I got to see the industry at its best, each company celebrating when another company would get a milestone, knowing that the world needed some help, and this was a way to do that. So I kind of feel like I got to start off and see the entire industry at its best. There's always complications and ups and downs. I think one of the things that we started to see, and it's one of the big trends that I believe will be with us for a while, is kind of the advent of disinformation. And I think sometimes, you're trying to do the right thing. You go into it with good intent, and you don't realize always how those words might be misconstrued or intentionally amplified in a way. But I think it's certainly opened my personal eyes to, what is the world of disinformation? How is it being used to kind of sway public opinion and things like that? And I think as CIOs, this is something, if you're not already knee deep in, if you don't have external advisors that can help you when you get into this, I would highly encourage you to do that. Because I think the downside is, no matter what you do, there'll be things of it that are really positive. And then there's going to be people who are trying to capitalize on it for other purposes. And, it's how do you always keep that in check? I think for me personally, just the level of empathy really went up. I mean, I think I was always quite an empathetic person, but all of a sudden, people were losing loved ones, but couldn't say goodbye. And we're trying to deal with all of that while they were working and trying to be teachers and homeschool their children and take care of elderly parents and, get their jobs done, knowing that, the work they were doing was really vital to the world health and all of that. So it just put a lot of different things into perspective around, how do we as leaders allow people to manage the multiple aspects of their life? And sometimes their home life will infringe on work, and sometimes work infringes on their home life, but how do we lead in a different way as well?
Great thoughts across the board. I really appreciate you sharing all those perspectives, Cindy. You talked about an unfortunate trend that's arisen, the advent of disinformation, as you pointed out. I wonder what tech trends, as you look to the future, or trends generally speaking, have you excited as you look a year or two or three out? What are some things that are starting to make their way into your roadmap that have you particularly encouraged?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm a bit of a techno optimist. So I tend to get excited about the future of technology. It certainly has the downsides that we need to worry about as well. But I just envision this whole connected world, this world where our digital world and our physical world are just seamlessly kind of integrated together. And with that is kind of the whole advent of the spatial web, Web3. And, I think technologies like 6G, we're talking about 5G, but 6G is already, on the horizon. But when we think about, what that will bring and the reduction of latency and the increased speed that we'll be able to get, you can imagine this more metaverse type world where things are, augmented reality has become dominant. People are able to walk the streets of New York and read the signs and all that right through their glasses without, the other day I was there and I was looking for directions and I had my head, kind of buried in my phone. I think that'll be a thing of the past. And so getting familiar with the spatial web, getting familiar with metaverse, augmented reality, these are things that we're quite heavily invested in as a company, because again, not all of it is always relevant right in the moment. But if you don't start to get yourself up to speed and knowing, where the opportunities lie, then I think you find yourself at the tail end. So we've kind of recently stood up a whole what we call XR. So whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality team, we've got our own metaverse environment, looking at how to the digital twins that we already have play into that, and just trying to build up some internal muscle on some of these trends.
That's really interesting, Cindy. So I'm hearing you say it's important, even if the value isn't immediately apparent, it's important to be immersed in this and to test things out and to validate value or lack thereof in a whole range of areas, so that you're not caught wrong-footed or behind others, but are sort of pushing the envelope as to what's possible. Is that a fair
Yeah.
synopsis?
Absolutely. And I think technology is changing so fast. I always talk to the team. I'm like, if you're not learning every single day, like you're going to become irrelevant fairly quickly, because I don't know about you, but it takes a lot of time to keep myself current.
Indeed, indeed. No, very well said. Cindy, I also wanted to ask you, as somebody who has achieved such remarkable heights at a organization of great consequence, just as you have at other big companies that I alluded to in introducing you, what are some thoughts about the secrets to your success? And I'd especially love if you wouldn't mind tuning your response, perhaps in a way that those who are a few rungs behind you, who might wish to follow in your footsteps, some advice that you might offer in terms of the pathway to a position like yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's really rooted in kind of who I am. So a big part of it is I love to learn. I love to learn new things. I try every day to start my day with 15 minutes of learning at least. It just kind of puts in my mindset that, hey, there's a lot I don't know, and, being the student of life and being open to new things. So I think the first thing is, do you invest in your own learning? And if not, that's probably something I would recommend. And it doesn't have to be incremental. Sometimes it could be listening to this podcast on the drive into the office or while you're out for a run. Learning doesn't have to be an incremental time commitment. Earlier today, I was talking to a group of people and I said, it could just be inviting somebody to lunch and asking them what they do and starting to learn different areas and all of that. So I would say learning has been probably the biggest thing if I were to put my mind on it. I think being open to doing new things, probably in the last 10 years, I heard about a phrase and it's really stuck with me. It's like jump and trust that the safety net will appear. And I think what it for me means is just say yes to different things you're asked to do. I mean, some of them aren't the best, maybe not what you would have even wanted for yourself, But by just leaning in when opportunities present, all of a sudden I look back and I think, ooh, that job that they asked me to do that I really didn't want to do is probably one of the, pivotal ones that got me where I am today. Um, I think you've got to be at times willing to do jobs that nobody else wants to do. So I first became a CIO. I was at SAB Miller and based in London, and they needed somebody to go down to Africa and be the CIO. Probably was not on my career plan, but I just said yes, and it was one of the most enriching experiences I've ever had. And so I think this openness would be the second thing. And then I think, the third is probably networking. And, you and I have talked about this in the past, but especially in today's digital era where everything is being done in an ecosystem, no one company can do it on their own. Do you have the network of people that you can, reach out to kind of collaborate with and get things done? It's probably the third.
Really great thoughts all around, Cindy. Thank you for sharing a bit about those difference makers for you. The idea of being a lover of learning agile, if you will, therefore like thinking about what's next and how you can add to your bailiwick is such a great piece of advice. Being open to do new things certainly makes a lot of sense, and of course, thinking like a group, building a great ecosystem to which you can turn to do special things. All great pieces of advice. Well, Cindy Hoots, thank you so much for joining me today, sharing a bit about your remarkable career, your remarkable tenure at AstraZeneca, and a bit about what you're seeing for the future as well. It's been a really great conversation.
Thanks so much, Peter. Great to be with you. We'll talk soon.